On a busy day, thank you very much for making the time.
A pleasure to be with you, Susan.
It's a difficult time. I think the UK recent attacks were deeply terrifying for Canadians, unsettling. Your speech was about tolerance, liberalism, diversity. You say Canadians are so great at this, but is this the right time, and how tough is it to make that message right now?
Let me just say one word about the London attacks, Susan. I want to reiterate how much Canada's heart goes out to London and also to the family of an amazing young Canadian woman who died. And I was particularly moved and really inspired by that family who said we should all go follow Chrissy's example, they called her, and go work in our local homeless shelters and say Chrissy sent us. And maybe that is a partial answer to your question. We are a country that is strong, that is willing, as I discussed today, to use muscle, military power in defense of our values and our allies.
But you've got a quarter of Canadians in a recent poll who say maybe we should have a travel ban. You've got 40% saying the refugee targets for this year are too high. There are some Canadians who are feeling deeply uncertain and worried and vulnerable. So do you risk sounding tone deaf, talking about liberalism and diversity and tolerance, and perhaps not hearing them? The opposition is saying it's frothy liberalism.
I am absolutely convinced that there is not only no contradiction between keeping Canadians safe and standing up for our values, I think those things are mutually reinforcing. Canada is stronger. Our open society is stronger. Our liberal values are stronger in a world where those values are most broadly shared. And that is not frothy liberalism. We are at a time and a place when international institutions need to be reinvented and renewed. And I argued today, and I believe so strongly, we need to double down on that international rules-based order. And doing that is the best way. I believe it is the only way to ensure safety and security for Canadians. There are only 36 million Canadians. A Fortress Canada approach is not going to be an approach that will maintain our prosperity or our safety.
So you talked a lot about America today. Are you saying we need to go it alone and put some separation between our foreign policy and America's foreign policy? You referenced it a lot in your speech today. What exactly are you saying about Canada's role now?
My central conviction is about Canada recommitting to building our leadership in our multilateral alliances. Having said that, we also need to be honest with ourselves and with Canadians. And we need to be honest about the fact that the election in the United States last fall, for many Americans, was an expression of a weariness with the burdens of global leadership.
You said they're questioning global leadership.
Exactly.
So if they're questioning global leadership, you're saying we have to take a sovereign, almost a sovereign approach.
We have to appreciate that we as Canadians, our country, a middle power, is a huge beneficiary of this international rules-based order, and we have to step up.
It seems to many that your government's approach to the United States and to President Trump has been appeasement, mannerly, polite. You've talked about the humility as a great Canadian virtue. But given what's going on in the United States, with the unpredictability of his response to NAFTA alone, tearing it up, threatening it, saying we're taking advantage of America, is it time to have less manners and more muscle, a more aggressive approach?
I think the Canadian way, Susan, is to have both manners and muscle. And I don't think the two are contradictory. I think it's absolutely right for us to be polite, for us to be reasonable, for us to be fact-based. I also absolutely think we need to be absolutely firm and resolute in defense of the national economic interest.
So will there be resistance? Are you going to have a pattern of resistance against them pushing Canada to get more benefit out of the NAFTA deal?
Trade negotiations are always tough. trade negotiations are always about every country working hard to get the best possible deal. And that's what we're going to do. I do want to say one thing, really, to reassure Canadians. We have the best, the smartest, the toughest, and the most professional trade negotiators in the world. I know, because other countries are constantly trying to hire them. So I feel these are going to be robust negotiations. I believe trade is win-win, and I think we're going to get there, and I think we're going to get a great deal for Canada.
But you're dealing with President Trump, who we haven't seen the likes of before. You must have to alter your strategy. You must sit at your desk some days and say, what? What's this now?
Good diplomats always think about their strategy and their approach in terms of what works with the person across the table. So, of course,
so what works
true.
with him?
Well, my direct counterpart is Secretary Tillerson. His experience running ExxonMobil is a great advantage for Canada. I said to Secretary Tillerson the first time I met him that I thought he was probably the cabinet secretary with the deepest knowledge of Canada and the Canadian economy, and he did not disagree. So I think in him we have a strong voice at the U.S. cabinet table who really understands Canada.
So you say you deal with the person across from you. How does the Canadian government approach Donald Trump?
So I've been present with the Prime Minister at his 2 face-to-face meetings with President Trump. And I have to say, they were really good meetings. The President really listened. He listened carefully to what we had to say and responded to it. It was a real conversation. There was a real warmth in the meetings. And in both of them, including most recently in Italy and Taormina, the President talked about Canada being the largest market for the United States. The President said that, a little bit incredulously. He was like, you guys are really important to us. And we said, yeah.
He's figured that out.
Absolutely.
But is a charm offensive going to work?
I think we have to have good manners and have strong muscles. And I think that's our approach to the United States. In some ways, that would be a good summary of the foreign policy speech I gave today. We have strong, positive, optimistic values, and at the end of the day, we need to back them up with strength. I think that's a good way of approaching the world and a very Canadian way of approaching the world.
That is a perfect place to end. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.